Part 1.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6.
Good morning, Tars Car Insurance. How can I help you?
Hello, I was wondering if you could give me a quote for my car, please. I'd like to insure it for a period of 12 months.
Certainly. I need to take down a few details first of all. Can I have your name, please?
Certainly, it's James Bartolo.
Sorry, can you say that again, please?
Sure, James Bartolo. That's Bartolo.
Okay, thanks. And your date of birth?
It's the 1st of the 8th, 1973.
Great. And can you give me your address, please?
Sure, it's 146 Eastern Road, Chester.
Fabulous. Now, is the insurance for just yourself?
No, actually my wife drives the car too. Her name is Alice Jackson and her date of birth is the 23rd of the 4th, 1968.
That's okay. I just need to write yes or no and the make and model of the car you wish to insure.
It's a 1998 Ford Laser.
Okay. And do you have any idea of the value of the car?
Yes, it's around £4,000. I only bought it about a week ago.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Okay, and do either you or your wife have any previous convictions or disqualifications? I'm sorry we have to ask this question, but of course it affects the price of the insurance cover.
Not a problem. No, actually we both have clean driving licenses. Nothing so far, touch wood.
Good. So I can write none for that question. Now, who were you previously insured with?
With Aitken Insurance.
I'm sorry, could you spell that?
Yes, it's AITKEN. I actually have a 3 years no claims bonus too.
Great. That will bring the price down a little for you too. Okay, if you just give me a few minutes, I'll work out a price for you now. That looks like it will be £275 per year.
That sounds good to me. Can I pay for that now over the telephone?
That is the end of Part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2.
Part 2. A conversation between Mrs. Lamb, a member of the staff in a large hospital, and Andrew, who is a student in the nursing school. Mrs. Lamb is explaining the rules about visiting hours in the hospital.
First, look at questions 11 to 14. Listen carefully.
Hello, Andrew. I believe you want to know about visiting hours.
Yes, I do, Mrs. Lamb. I have to fill this form out, and I'd like to have some idea why the different parts of the hospital have different times for visiting.
I see. Well, let's start with an obvious one. Intensive care. People in intensive care are very sick indeed, and for that reason, We say that visitors can come between 6 a.m. and midnight.
I can understand that.
At the other end of the scale, our maternity patients are usually quite well, but we restrict their visiting hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We find they get very tired if we permit visitors all the time.
I see. What about the surgical wards?
The doctors prefer to do their rounds early in surgical, so visiting hours are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Surgical patients are often on very heavy painkillers, and they aren't really very good company for their visitors.
But surely the visitors come to cheer up the patient, not the other way round.
Of course, and often the visitors are able to help the patient a lot. That's why we allow visitors all day, the full 24 hours in the emergency ward. They help comfort the patient while they're waiting to be diagnosed. Of course, it's not just everyone who can visit a sick patient. People in intensive care can only be visited by their immediate family. What's more, we only allow 2 people in at any time. We let children of the immediate family in to visit people in intensive care, but we don't like to do it. It's very hard on the children, and it may distress the patient. However, if the patient asks for the child, and the family agrees, that's okay.
What about children in maternity?
Of course we let them in. They're very pleased to see their mothers. The rule in maternity is everyone may visit, up to 6 people at a time. The maternity ward is quite sociable after all.
The surgical ward must be different.
It is indeed. We don't allow children in the surgical ward because of the danger of infection. And as you know, we restrict the hours. There are a lot of procedures which must be carried out on surgical patients, and we only let 2 visitors come in at a time.
And in emergency, people are allowed to visit all the time?
Oh yes, we rely on patients' relatives to be there for them, and we permit everyone to visit the emergency department at all hours. However, we restrict it to 3 visitors for each patient. Otherwise, the room just gets totally crowded.
Before the broadcast continues, look at questions 15 to 20. You will now listen to the second part of the talk.
Now I had your schedule for the next week's observation sessions. Are you ready?
Yes. Where do I start?
On Monday, you'll be in male surgical in the morning and in female surgical in the afternoon. You'll be following Dr. Shea on her rounds.
Thank you. And on Tuesday?
On Tuesday, you'll be with Dr. Thomas in the morning and Dr. Robertson in the afternoon. No, that can't be right. You're with Dr. Thomas in the afternoon and Dr. Robertson in the morning.
Do I ever get to see Dr. Kim?
Yes, you'll be with Dr. Kim on Thursday and Friday. She'll take you through the children's ward and through our new teenage ward for 12 to 15-year-olds.
Great. I've read a lot about that new ward. Will I see the schoolroom?
Maybe another time.
And what will I do on Wednesday?
On Wednesday, you'll join the other students for lectures. You'll be in the Redmore lecture room between 8 and 10 a.m. and later between 2 and 3 p.m.
Thank you. Do you know how big my class is?
The intake this term is 200 first-year students. I'm pleased to say about 1/3 are men, which is good. Nursing used to be an almost entirely female occupation.
I know. My father trained as a nurse, and he was considered very unusual.
Is he still working as a nurse?
Yes, he's working in a hospital in the country. I guess I just wanted to follow his example.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You are going to hear the rest of the talk about family history. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
So, that's a few ideas about getting information, but what about methods of recording it? Of course, you can just write down what family members say, but it's even better if you can use a tape, so that you can record them as they're talking. Then you don't have to worry too much about making mistakes. You'll always be able to listen to it again. But whatever method you do use to record information, remember that it's very important to make a note of exactly how you got it. So, if you are using tape, always start the recording by saying the date and the place, as well as the name of the person you're interviewing. So, apart from people's memories, where else can you find information? Well, there are all sorts of documents, and they can be extremely useful. People keep lots of kinds of documents in the home, like photos or letters or diaries or birth certificates. And some people keep things from newspapers, like obituaries. Obituaries are announcements of a person's death, and they usually contain a lot of detail about that individual, like address, occupation, date of death, as well as the names and ages of the widow or widower and the dead person's children. So, be creative. Look around your home or the home of your relatives for any items that might contain clues, such as these about your family history. Okay?
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Now, you'll find that you'll collect a lot of information, so you'll need to record it in an organized way. I'd recommend that you use an ancestor chart, like this one here. Can you all see? Ancestor charts act like maps. They link 4 or 5 generations in a family tree. So they're very convenient, and they don't cost anything. You can get as many as you like. You just download them free from the internet. Then you fill them out as you go along, and for each individual you record all the key information next to their full name. It's very convenient. Now, at this point, I'd just like to give you a couple of tips about filling in the ancestor sheet. First of all, I'd advise you to use pencil, at least until you have definite evidence for the information you're recording. Secondly, as well as recording official names, I mean given names, it's worth writing any nicknames down. You know, these are the short names that people call you when they know you very well. And you can show them by using quotation marks. That's ancestor charts then. They really do save a lot of work. Now, before I show you how to go about confirming the information you collected...
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
We're going to hear a talk on wild rice. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen to the tape and answer the questions.
Good morning. Today we'd like to talk about wild rice. Contrary to what many people believe, wild rice is not rice at all, but a grass. Much of it sold in the world today is not even wild, but rather cultivated varieties that do not occur naturally. Wild rice is really an annual aquatic seed found mostly in the upper freshwater lakes of Canada, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota in North America. Indians gathered wild rice before any explorers set foot on the North American continent. Early explorers were greatly impressed with the strength and hardiness of the woodland Indians, and attributed their vitality to their ample servings of wild rice. Wild rice can grow in water as shallow as 3 or 4 feet along marshes and muddy waters. A tall plant, it grows to a height of 8 to 10 feet, with a long flower cluster that reminds one of a narrow broom. The grains in their husks on the tall stalk look somewhat like oats. Truly wild rice is a challenging crop to grow. Even today, it's very susceptible to failure due to weather conditions. If a heavy windstorm comes along just before harvesting, the seeds could be blown into the water, ruining an entire crop. Harvesting at just the right time becomes a matter of beating the birds to it, since wild rice is considered a delicacy by many birds living in the area. Other challenges include insects, disease, poor drainage, and high waters. If the grains are too green, they are difficult to thresh or beat out of their husks. If left on the plant too long, even a few days too long, they fall off the plant into the water. Airboats have brought about recent improvements in commercial harvesting of the wild rice, while newer techniques for parching, winnowing, and hulling have been a help in saving time and labour. Still, it takes about 3 pounds of grass seed to yield 1 pound of wild rice. Buyers should be aware of 2 types of wild rice, gathered and commercial. Foraged or hand-harvested wild rice is gradually being pushed out of the market by hybrid commercial varieties. Hand-harvested wild rice makes up less than 20% of the market today. Heirloom varieties of this foraged grain still exist. In fact, it is the only heirloom grain sold commercially. However, package labels can be deceiving. Though the label may read Indian harvested or organic, the product may be hybridized wild rice placed in freshwater lakes and gathered by Indians in airboats. Hand-harvested, organic, and from the Great Lakes region is the real thing, with superior flavour and aroma, but it may be difficult to find. Though wild rice is one of the most expensive grains, it goes a long way. Some say that 1 pound of the grain can feed 30 people. To compensate for its high cost, try combining wild rice half and half, with brown rice. For a truly colourful presentation, try 1/3 of each: white rice, brown rice, and wild rice.
That is the end of part 4.